The rancher took the Apache girl to his ex's wedding. She asked, "So, how would I introduce myself?" The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and a gentle breeze rustled the tall grasses. Life on the ranch was quiet, peaceful, and in many ways lonely. He had built this life with his own hands, caring for the land, the animals, and the few friends who still lived nearby. But tonight, a small envelope sat on the porch beside him, its contents heavy with memories he wasn't sure he wanted to face. The envelope was from Sarah, his ex-wife. John had not seen her in years. Their separation had been difficult, filled with misunderstanding and silent resentment. Yet somehow, he had accepted that life moves on, and so did people. He carefully opened the envelope and unfolded the card inside. The words were simple, polite, and formal, an invitation to her wedding. John's stomach twisted slightly. He had not expected to hear from her, let alone receive such an invitation. He leaned back in his chair, running his hands over the worn wooden armrests, thinking about what it would mean to attend. Part of him wanted to ignore it completely, to stay in the comfort of his ranch and pretend the world beyond these hills didn't exist. But another part of him was curious. What would Sarah's new life look like? Who was she marrying? And perhaps more importantly, how would it feel to see her happy with someone else? John's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. Leela, the young Apache woman who worked at the ranch during the busy seasons, appeared with her usual quiet confidence. She carried a bucket of feed for the chickens, but noticed immediately that John was not his usual calm self. She set the bucket down gently and tilted her head, curious. "You look troubled," Leela said softly, her dark eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. John gave a small, wry smile. "I got an invitation today," he admitted, holding up the envelope, "to Sarah's wedding." Leela's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Your ex-wife?" she asked, clearly trying to hide her amusement. "And you're thinking about going?" John shrugged. "I don't know. Part of me wants to see it for closure, I guess. Part of me wants to stay far away and forget it all." He paused, glancing at her. "It's complicated." Leela studied him for a moment, then spoke with her usual straightforwardness. "Well, you're not going alone, are you?" John chuckled. "I suppose I could bring someone," he said, almost joking. He hesitated, then added with a half-smile, "If someone wanted to come with me, that is." Leela raised an eyebrow, sensing the challenge in his tone. "And who would that be?" she asked, her voice teasing. John's grin widened, though there was a trace of uncertainty. "I was thinking maybe you," Leela blinked, momentarily caught off guard. She had spent months working alongside John, respecting his strength and independence, but she had never imagined being asked to accompany him to such a formal, personal event. She laughed quietly, shaking her head. "You're serious?" she asked. "Why not?" John replied earnestly. "I think it would be interesting, and honestly, I trust you to help me survive the evening." For a long moment, Leela studied him. She could see the mixture of anxiety and honesty in his expression. She knew John was a man who rarely opened up, who preferred the quiet of his ranch to the complexities of the world beyond. And yet, here he was, inviting her into a situation that could be awkward, uncomfortable, or even challenging. Leela felt a spark of curiosity and excitement. "All right," she said finally, a small smile forming on her lips. "I'll go, but only if you promise not to embarrass me." John laughed, a deep, relieved sound. "Deal," he said. The next morning they prepared for the journey. John cleaned his old truck until it shone, checking the tires, oil, and gas. Leela, for her part, packed a small bag with simple clothes, aware that this world of city weddings would be very different from the open fields and dusty paths she was used to. They left the ranch in the early morning, the sun barely peeking over the horizon. The truck rumbled over the winding roads, and as they drove, a quiet conversation began between them, a conversation that felt both casual and strangely significant. Leela asked about the ranch, about the animals, about the way John had built this life for himself. John spoke reluctantly at first, but then the words came easier, memories and stories flowing like water from a well he had kept closed for too long. Leela listened intently, asking questions that made him reflect, laugh, and sometimes sigh. In turn, she shared her own experiences growing up in her Apache community. She spoke of family traditions, of the importance of the land, of the stories and values passed down through generations. John listened, fascinated. He realized that Leela's world, though different from his own, held a depth and wisdom he had rarely encountered. By the time they stopped for lunch at a small roadside diner, the tension between them had eased. They shared sandwiches and coffee, laughing at small mistakes and misadventures during the drive. John found himself appreciating her perspective, her humor, and her courage. Leela, meanwhile, began to see John not just as the rancher she worked for, but as a man with layers, memories, and emotions that he often kept hidden. As they approached the city, the landscape changed. Rolling hills gave way to highways, buildings, and the hum of traffic. Leela looked out the window, taking in the sights with a mixture of wonder and quiet apprehension. John noticed her expression and felt a protective instinct stir within him. He knew the wedding would be a world away from the quiet of the ranch, and he wondered how she would fare among strangers, social rules, and expectations. Finally, they arrived at the venue, a grand hall surrounded by gardens and elegant decorations. John felt a knot of anxiety as he parked the truck, while Leela took a deep breath, steadying herself. She could sense the mix of emotions in John: nervousness, curiosity, a hint of old wounds reopening. She reached out and touched his arm lightly, a gesture of reassurance. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "And so will I." John nodded, grateful for her presence. Together they stepped out of the truck and approached the entrance, ready to face a past, a present, and perhaps an uncertain future. The doors opened, and they entered a world of soft music, laughter, and the subtle tension of people observing, judging, and celebrating. In that moment, both John and Leela knew that this night would be more than just a wedding. It would be a journey of understanding, courage, and unexpected connections. As they walked in, Leela leaned slightly toward John and whispered, "So, how would I introduce myself?" John froze for a moment, caught between a laugh and a sigh. He looked at her, realizing that this simple question carried more weight than he expected. Here was a young woman, confident yet uncertain, stepping into a situation that could be awkward, yet she was willing to face it with honesty. He smiled and whispered back, "Just be yourself. That's more than enough." And with that, they took their first steps into a room full of memories, strangers, and possibilities, unaware that the night ahead would test their courage, patience, and the bond that was slowly forming between them. The morning sun was still low on the horizon as John and Leela settled into the truck for the drive to the wedding. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth and grass from the ranch. John turned the key in the ignition, and the engine rumbled to life, steady and familiar. Leela adjusted her seat, glancing at him with a smile that was both curious and amused. "So," she said, breaking the quiet, "tell me again why you thought it was a good idea to bring me along to a wedding of your ex-wife." John glanced at her, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Honestly, I thought it might be fun. And besides," he paused, as if weighing his words carefully, "I trust you. I mean, you handle yourself well in almost any situation, and I needed someone I could rely on, someone who wouldn't be afraid to speak up if things got awkward." Leela laughed softly. "That's flattering, I think." She leaned back in her seat, crossing her arms, and gave him a pointed look. "But you do realize weddings can be complicated, right? People get emotional, memories come up, and some conversations aren't very polite." "I know," John admitted, staring out at the road ahead. "I'm prepared for some of it, not all though. That's why I thought you coming along would make it easier and more interesting." Leela tilted her head thoughtfully. "Interesting, huh? That's a polite way to say stressful." John chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's the right word for something I'm not ready to describe yet. The road stretched ahead, long and winding, cutting through rolling hills and open plains. The truck bounced slightly over the uneven pavement, the rhythmic hum of the tires on the road blending with the soft morning breeze. The two of them fell into a comfortable silence, each lost in thought. John was thinking about the wedding, about Sarah, about how much he had changed over the years, and about how different his life had become since leaving the city behind. Leela was observing him, noticing the small details, the way his hands gripped the steering wheel, the way his eyes softened when he looked at the horizon, and the quiet patience that seemed to have grown in him over the years. After a few miles, Leela broke the silence again. "Tell me about the ranch," she said. "Not just the work but the life. What's it like day after day?" John smiled faintly. "It's hard mostly, but there's a rhythm to it. You wake up early, feed the animals, check the fences, fix what needs fixing. There's always something to do. Some days are lonely, yes, but there's also a kind of peace in it. You get close to the land and the animals. You see the seasons change, the sun rise and set, and you feel connected to something bigger than yourself." Leela listened intently, nodding. "That sounds grounding, and I guess it teaches patience too." "More than anything," John said. "Patience, persistence, and humility. You learn that not everything can be controlled. Sometimes you fight, sometimes you wait, and sometimes you just adapt." Leela smiled. "Sounds like the ranch has shaped you more than you realize." John glanced at her, surprised by the insight in her words. "Maybe, and what about you?" he asked. "Your life, has it shaped you the same way?" She hesitated, thinking of her childhood in her Apache community. "Yes, in many ways. There's respect for the land, respect for family and traditions. We're taught to observe, to listen, to understand before we act. Life has a rhythm too, just different from yours." John nodded slowly. "I think I understand that. I've spent so much time alone with the land, and now hearing you talk, I realize how similar our experiences are, in a way." The conversation eased the tension between them, creating a sense of connection that neither had expected. The miles passed quickly as they shared stories, funny incidents from the ranch, Leela's childhood memories, and even small embarrassing moments that made them both laugh. At one point the truck hit a small pothole, jolting them both slightly. Leela grabbed the dashboard, laughing nervously. "Okay, that was close. You drive like a cowboy, not like a city driver." John laughed, shaking his head. "City drivers, I don't know much about them. All I know is keeping the truck steady on these roads, and making sure you don't get thrown out." They laughed together, the sound echoing in the empty road, carrying a sense of camaraderie and warmth. For a while, the world outside the truck seemed to disappear, leaving only the two of them and the rhythm of the journey. As noon approached, they stopped at a small roadside diner for lunch. The diner was simple but welcoming, with the smell of fresh bread and coffee filling the air. They found a booth by the window, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Leela ordered a sandwich and coffee, while John went for a burger and iced tea. While waiting for their food, Leela asked, "Do you ever regret leaving the city?" John thought for a moment. "Sometimes, maybe, but mostly no. Life here is honest. People are real, work is real, and the land, it gives you perspective. The city has its charms, sure, but it's easy to get lost there. Out here, you can't hide from yourself." Leela nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that. Sometimes the quiet teaches you more than the noise ever could." Their food arrived and they ate slowly, sharing bites and stories. John talked about the animals he cared for, the challenges of weather, and the pride he felt when the land thrived. Leela shared more about her family, about ceremonies and stories she had grown up with, and about the values she carried with her every day. Each story revealed layers of personality, wisdom, and experience. After lunch, they resumed their journey. The highway stretched ahead, lined with trees and distant mountains. Leela watched the landscape change, marveling at the variety of scenery she had never seen. "It's beautiful," she said quietly, "but also a little overwhelming." John glanced at her. "You'll do fine," he said gently. "And besides, you'll see that the wedding isn't as overwhelming as it seems. It's just people celebrating. We'll navigate it together." As they drove, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. They discussed favorite foods, childhood games, and silly mistakes from past jobs. John told a story about an old ranch dog that had once gotten lost in a storm, and Leela laughed so hard she had to hold onto the seat. In return, Leela shared a story about learning to ride a horse for the first time, and John laughed along, amazed at her bravery and sense of humor. The miles passed quickly, and soon the outskirts of the city appeared in the distance. Leela's excitement and nervousness were both visible, her hands clasped in her lap as she watched the taller buildings and busier streets approach. John noticed her apprehension and felt a protective, almost paternal instinct rise within him. "You ready for this?" he asked softly, breaking the silence. Leela took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be," she replied. "I just hope I don't make a fool of myself." John smiled reassuringly. "You won't, just be yourself, that's more than enough." They drove past traffic lights, busy streets, and honking cars, slowly leaving the familiar countryside behind. The city was alive with movement, noise, and color, a stark contrast to the calm of the ranch. Leela observed everything with wide eyes, taking mental notes of how different this world felt. John watched her reaction, impressed by her poise despite the obvious unfamiliarity. Finally, they reached the wedding venue, a beautiful hall surrounded by gardens and fountains, elegant and orderly. John parked the truck in a lot filled with other cars, and both of them stepped out, stretching after the long drive. The air here smelled different, sweeter and warmer, filled with the scent of flowers and freshly cut grass. They stood side by side for a moment, taking in the scene. John could feel the tension building again, a mix of anticipation, nervousness, and the subtle pressure of memories resurfacing. Leela noticed it too and gently nudged him with her elbow. "Don't worry," she said softly. "We'll handle this, together." John smiled, feeling a sense of comfort he hadn't expected. "Together," he echoed. With that, they walked toward the entrance, each step carrying a mix of curiosity and courage. Leela glanced at him and whispered almost playfully, "So, how would I introduce myself?" John froze for a moment, realizing that her simple question carried more weight than he expected. He smiled and whispered back, "Just be yourself. That's all you need." And so, hand in spirit, if not literally, they stepped into a new world. A world of laughter, tension, memories, and possibilities. The road trip had not just been a journey to a wedding. It had been a journey of understanding, connection, and the quiet beginnings of a bond neither of them had anticipated. The large double doors of the wedding hall opened with a soft creak, and John and Leela stepped inside, instantly feeling the contrast between the quiet ranch and the polished, elegant world around them. The air was filled with the scent of fresh flowers, perfumes, and soft music playing somewhere near the front. Guests, dressed in sparkling dresses and sharp suits, moved gracefully, chatting, laughing, and exchanging warm greetings. Leela's eyes widened slightly as she took it all in. She had never been to a place like this, where every detail seemed carefully planned and polished. John glanced around nervously, feeling the familiar tension rise in his chest. Sarah, his ex-wife, stood near the center of the room, radiant in a white gown. Her smile was genuine, but John could detect the subtle stiffness in her posture, the kind that comes from knowing how others might judge her. He felt a mixture of old memories and lingering unease as he adjusted his tie. Leela, sensing his discomfort, placed a hand lightly on his arm. "You'll be fine," she said softly. "Just breathe and smile. That's all anyone really notices." John smiled faintly, grateful for her calm presence. Leela herself took a deep breath, straightening her back and smoothing the folds of her simple but elegant dress. Though her clothing was different from the elaborate attire of other guests, there was something in her posture, in the quiet confidence in her eyes that made her stand out in a subtle but remarkable way. As they walked further into the hall, a few heads turned to look at them. Some faces displayed polite curiosity, while others carried the faintest hint of judgment. John could sense the whispers before he heard them. "Is that?" one woman murmured. Another guest tilted her head, looking at Leela with a mixture of surprise and admiration. Leela noticed, but she didn't falter. Instead, she held herself with quiet dignity, scanning the room with keen eyes, aware of the subtle social dynamics at play. John's ex-wife, Sarah, finally noticed them and approached with a practiced smile. "John, it's so good to see you," she said, extending her hand. Her eyes flickered briefly toward Leela, and John could sense the unspoken question. Who was this young woman at his side? "This is Lila," John said simply. "She came with me." Leela nodded politely, offering a small, respectful smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you," she said clearly and confidently. Her tone was calm, her presence serene. Sarah smiled, slightly caught off guard by Leela's poise. "The pleasure is mine," she said, though John could detect the subtle tension in her voice. She turned to greet the other guests, leaving John and Leela standing slightly to the side, observing the flow of the room. John whispered almost under his breath, "Just follow my lead and remember you're doing fine." Leela tilted her head slightly and whispered back, "I'll do my best, but how should I introduce myself? I don't want to cause a scene." John paused, thinking carefully. "Just say you're my friend or someone I trust. That's enough. No need to explain anything more. People will figure it out themselves." She nodded, taking the advice to heart, and they slowly began moving through the crowd, exchanging polite smiles and nods with people who approached them. Some asked casual questions. "How do you know John?" or "Where are you from?" Leela answered honestly and simply, mentioning that she worked on John's ranch. Her calm honesty surprised many of the guests. Some nodded politely, others whispered briefly among themselves, but no one was rude. Despite the outward calm, John felt the subtle tension of the room pressing against him. This was a world so different from his ranch, so different from the quiet life he had built. Memories of past conversations, arguments, and misunderstandings with Sarah resurfaced briefly, only to be replaced by the need to stay composed. Layla, on the other hand, seemed to navigate the room with an ease that impressed him. She smiled gently at strangers, spoke softly yet confidently, and did not allow herself to be intimidated by the elegance or sophistication of the other guests. As they reached the edge of the main hall, John noticed a group of guests whispering while glancing at Leela. He felt a protective instinct stir, wanting to shield her from unnecessary judgment or scrutiny. "Ignore them," he murmured. "They don't matter. Focus on yourself and on me." Leela's eyes met his and she nodded, appreciating the subtle reassurance. She understood the challenge they faced, not hostility exactly, but the quiet, often unspoken judgments of people who could not easily accept someone different from themselves. She had faced similar situations before, though never in a place quite so glamorous. Her calmness, however, was infectious. Even John, who usually bore the weight of social tension silently, felt his shoulders relax slightly as they moved further into the room. Soon, the ceremony began, and the music shifted to a gentle, formal tone. Guests took their seats, and John and Leela found themselves guided to a spot near the back. From there, they could see Sarah standing at the front, the expression on her face a mixture of joy and nervous anticipation. Leela leaned slightly toward John and whispered, "She looks happy." John nodded, a soft pang of emotion passing through him. "Yes, she does, and that's good, I guess. Really, I want her to be happy." He glanced at Leela, appreciating her quiet support. "Thanks for being here with me," he added softly. "You don't need to thank me," Leela said, her voice warm. "I'm here because I want to be, and because I like seeing the real you beyond the ranch and beyond the worries." John looked at her, touched by the words. In that moment he realized how much her presence mattered. She was not just a companion for appearances, she was a friend, a confidant, someone who understood and respected him without pretense. As the ceremony progressed, there were moments of subtle tension. A few guests asked questions about John's past, some curious, some unintentionally probing. Leela remained quietly observant, offering supportive glances and occasional gentle comments that helped John navigate the conversation without embarrassment. At one point, a distant cousin approached and asked bluntly, "So John, who is this young woman with you?" Leela smiled politely. "I'm a friend of John S.," she said calmly. "I've come along to support him tonight." The cousin raised an eyebrow, perhaps expecting a more elaborate explanation, but Leela's quiet confidence left them without a clear response. They murmured something polite and walked away, leaving John impressed and quietly relieved. During the reception, as guests mingled and shared conversations, Leela observed everything with a keen eye. She noticed subtle social dynamics, the way people whispered behind polite smiles, and the unspoken comparisons being made. She also noticed the moments of kindness, the small gestures of genuine hospitality, the quiet encouragements, and the way some guests made an effort to welcome them. John, meanwhile, felt a mixture of pride and gratitude. Leela's presence was a shield and a light, helping him move through an environment that could have been uncomfortable, even painful. Her honesty, her calm demeanor, and her ability to remain composed impressed him more than he could articulate. Later in the evening, John and Leela found a quiet corner near the garden, away from the crowd. The music and laughter still floated from inside, but here there was calm, a moment of peace amid the busy energy of the wedding. "You handled that well," John said quietly. "Better than I expected." Leela smiled, a gentle warmth in her eyes. "I just followed your lead, and I paid attention. You don't have to worry as much as you think." John shook his head slightly. "No, you're right, I'm just not used to this world. But having you here makes it easier. You see things clearly and you keep me grounded." Leela's eyes softened. "I'm glad I can help, but John, don't forget, you have more strength and calmness than you give yourself credit for. I see it. The other people in this room might not, but I do." For a moment, silence fell between them, comfortable and reflective. They watched the guests through the garden window, noticing laughter, gestures of care, and even small misunderstandings. The evening had been more challenging than either of them expected, yet they had navigated it together, learning, observing, and supporting one another. As the night drew on, John felt a sense of calm settle over him. Leela had proven herself not only capable of handling the social challenges of the evening, but also a true companion, someone who understood him, respected him, and offered insight without judgment. And Leela, in turn, had learned to navigate a world that was different, intimidating at times, but also filled with unexpected beauty and human connection. They returned to their seats inside the hall as the final part of the evening began, a quiet moment before the celebration concluded. John looked at Leela and whispered, "You did well tonight, better than I could have imagined." Leela smiled, her eyes reflecting both pride and amusement. "And you didn't embarrass me either," she teased gently. John laughed quietly. "I try my best." In that moment, amidst the music, the laughter, and the subtle tension of old memories, John and Leela realized something important. Their connection, born of a simple invitation and a long drive, had grown into something meaningful. They had faced uncertainty together, navigated challenges, and found strength in one another. And though the night was far from over, both of them knew that this evening had already changed something. Not just in their understanding of each other, but in how they approached life, relationships, and the unexpected journeys that lie ahead. The night was slowly winding down, and the soft glow of chandeliers reflected on the polished floors of the wedding hall. Guests laughed and danced, some in quiet corners talking, others moving gracefully across the room. John and Leela, after navigating the initial tension of the evening, felt slightly more comfortable among the crowd, though the subtle pressure of old memories and unspoken judgment still lingered. As they moved closer to the refreshment tables, a group of Sarah's friends approached, their smiles polite but measured. One of them, a woman with carefully styled hair and sharp eyes, leaned slightly toward John. "It's good to see you, John," she said sweetly, though her tone carried a hint of curiosity. "And this must be your guest." John glanced at Leela, feeling the tension of the moment. Leela stepped forward slightly, her voice calm and even. "I'm Leela. I work with John at his ranch. I came along to support him tonight." The woman's eyes widened slightly. She whispered something to the others, and a faint ripple of surprise passed through the small group. Leela held her head high, confident and composed, meeting their subtle curiosity with quiet dignity. John, watching, felt a surge of pride. She had handled the moment better than he could have, not with arrogance or confrontation, but with quiet strength and honesty. As the evening continued, John found himself pulled into conversations he had long avoided. Questions about his past, about the reasons for his divorce, and about what he had been doing since leaving the city surfaced repeatedly. Normally, he would have deflected, answered briefly, or excused himself. But tonight, with Leela at his side, he felt a steady reassurance. He could be honest, at least in part, and rely on her calm presence to navigate the social currents. Leela stayed close, offering support with small gestures, a nod, a soft smile, or a brief comment that eased tension. At one point, someone made a slightly awkward joke about John's ranch life, and Leela replied with a light but thoughtful comment. It was not confrontational, but it reminded the group that their assumptions might be too simple. John could see the respect forming in subtle ways, a quiet acknowledgement of her intelligence and grace. Later, they stepped outside to the small garden at the edge of the venue. The night air was cool and refreshing, carrying the scent of flowers and the faint warmth of summer. John leaned against the stone railing, taking a deep breath. "I didn't expect this to be so complicated," he admitted, almost to himself. Leela joined him, standing close but giving him space. "It's not easy being judged by strangers," she said softly. "Even polite people can make you feel exposed, but you handled it well, and you're stronger than you think." John looked at her, a faint smile on his lips. "Thanks to you," he said. "You've made tonight easier than I expected." They shared a quiet moment, watching the guests inside the hall. Some laughed, some whispered, and some moved in small groups. The subtle layers of social dynamics fascinated Leela. She had seen gatherings before, but this was a world of elegance, tradition, and unspoken expectations. She understood that every gesture, every word carried weight. Yet she also saw moments of genuine joy, kindness, and human connection. As they returned inside, they were approached by Sarah herself. Her expression was warm but slightly tense. "John, I hope you're enjoying the evening," she said carefully. Her eyes flickered toward Leela, a mixture of curiosity and subtle challenge in her gaze. "It's different," John said honestly, "but it's been good." He glanced at Leela, who offered a reassuring smile. "And I'm glad Leela came along. She's been a steady presence tonight." Sarah's expression softened slightly, though a trace of unease remained. "I'm glad she could join you," she said. "It's always nice to have someone supportive." After a polite exchange, she moved on, leaving John and Leela to navigate the remaining hours of the evening. They found a quiet corner near the hall's side, away from the main crowd. The soft hum of music and distant laughter reached them, but here there was calm, a chance to reflect on the night's events. "You know," Leela began, her voice gentle, "I think you underestimate yourself sometimes. You carry a lot of strength, calmness, and integrity. People may not always see it, but it's there." John looked at her thoughtfully. "I guess I've spent a lot of time being cautious, avoiding conflict, avoiding judgment. Tonight has reminded me that I don't always have to hide or protect myself. I can just be. With someone I trust. Leela smiled, a quiet warmth in her eyes. Exactly, and that's what makes you interesting. Not perfect, not polished, just real. A small laugh escaped John. Interesting, huh? That's the nicest thing anyone said to me all night. They walked slowly back toward the dance floor, watching couples sway gently to the music. Leela noticed a moment of awkwardness between some guests, and she whispered to John, pointing it out. See that? People are nervous because they care about appearances too much. Sometimes it's easier just to let things be. John nodded, impressed by her observation. You're right. You make things seem simpler somehow. As the night went on, small revelations surfaced. John realized how much he had changed since leaving the city and ending his marriage. He noticed the depth of Leela's wisdom, her ability to read situations, and the quiet confidence that allowed her to navigate social spaces with ease. Leela, in turn, learned about John's vulnerability, his sense of responsibility, and the patience and care he had cultivated through years of life on the ranch. At one point, a distant relative approached, asking questions that bordered on personal judgment. John felt a flash of old frustration but saw Leela's calm expression and remembered her advice. Patience, honesty, and quiet confidence. With a steady voice, he answered truthfully but simply, and Leela added a small, gentle comment that diffused any tension. The relative left, slightly surprised, and John felt a mixture of relief and pride. Later, during a brief lull in the evening, John and Leela stepped outside again, walking along the garden paths. The night was still and calm, with stars scattered across the dark sky. John looked at Leela, realizing how much her presence had helped him navigate the evening's challenges. You've taught me something tonight, he said quietly. Not just about handling social situations, but about trusting someone, letting someone be there with you. Leela smiled. And you've taught me something too. That strength can come in quiet ways, and that patience and honesty matter more than appearances. They walked in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. The night had been a test of character, patience, and courage. They had faced challenges, subtle judgments, and old memories, yet they had emerged with a deeper understanding of each other and themselves. As they returned to the hall for the final part of the evening, John felt a sense of calm he hadn't expected. Leela had proven herself not just capable of navigating this world, but also a true companion, someone who could see him clearly, support him without judgment, and challenge him gently when needed. Leela, in turn, had learned to observe, reflect, and adapt to a world that was new and sometimes intimidating, all while remaining true to herself. Before leaving their quiet spot, Leela looked at John and said softly, "You know, this night has been more than I expected. I didn't think attending a wedding could teach me so much about people and about you." John chuckled quietly. "And I didn't think I could feel this, understood by someone so quickly. You've made tonight better than I imagined." They returned to the hall, hand in spirit, ready to face the final moments of the evening. The music, laughter, and celebration surrounded them, but they had discovered a quiet connection amid the noise. They had learned about courage, honesty, patience, and the strength that comes from trust. As the wedding began to wind down, John realized something important. The night was not just about Sarah, the ceremony, or the celebration. It was about understanding, growth, and connection. And in that realization, he felt a deep gratitude for Leela, whose presence had made the difference between simply attending a wedding and truly experiencing it. They watched the final dances, the last moments of toasts, and the gentle farewells, knowing that the evening had left a mark on both of them. The challenges they faced together, the small confrontations, the quiet observations, and the gentle guidance they offered each other had strengthened their bond in ways neither had expected. As they stepped outside one last time, the cool night air wrapping around them, John looked at Leela and said quietly, "Tonight, I've learned more than I expected, and it's thanks to you." Leela smiled, her eyes reflecting the soft moonlight. And I've learned more than I expected too. Life has a way of teaching you when you least expect it. In that moment, standing under the quiet night sky, both of them understood that this evening had been more than a wedding. It had been a journey of courage, understanding, and the quiet beginnings of a bond that could grow far beyond this single night. The wedding hall was slowly emptying as the evening drew to a close. Guests hugged each other goodbye, some laughing, some wiping away tears, and others talking quietly about the evening's events. John and Leela remained for a moment, standing near the exit, watching the last guests leave. The soft glow of the chandeliers reflected off the polished floors, and the gentle music in the background had shifted to a slower, more reflective tone. John took a deep breath and looked around. The wedding had been more challenging than he had expected. The mix of old memories, social expectations, and the presence of so many people he had not seen in years had stirred emotions he had long kept under control. Yet through it all, Leela had been by his side, calm, confident, and supportive in a way that made him feel grounded. Leela watched him quietly, noticing the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes and the way his shoulders had gradually relaxed as the night progressed. She had observed the subtle tension he carried, the careful way he navigated conversations, and the patience it took to remain composed. And she had seen the moments when he smiled genuinely, laughed freely, or simply allowed himself to be present without pretense. "You did well tonight," Leela said softly, stepping closer to him. "Better than I expected." John looked at her and smiled, a small, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you," he admitted. "You were calm when I felt tense, confident when I felt unsure, and honest when I needed it most." Leela's cheeks flushed slightly, and she shook her head with a quiet laugh. "You don't have to thank me," she said. "I came along because I wanted to be here. Because I wanted to see you navigate this, and I think I learned a lot myself." John raised an eyebrow, curious. "Oh, and what did you learn?" She smiled, looking out at the quiet streets illuminated by the soft glow of street lamps. "I learned that strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, steady, and patient. I learned that courage can be found in honesty, in being yourself even when the world seems to expect something else. And I learned that people can surprise you if you give them a chance." John felt a warmth spread through him. Her words were simple, but they carried weight, truths that he had not fully acknowledged in himself. He realized that she had been observing him throughout the evening, noticing not just how he handled the wedding, but how he treated people, how he remained true to himself, and how he allowed space for others to be themselves. "You're right," he said quietly. "I think I have been surprised tonight, by people, by circumstances, and by how much I appreciate having someone like you by my side." They walked slowly toward the truck, the cool night air wrapping around them. The streets were quiet, the city now settled into a gentle calm after the excitement of the evening. Leela glanced at John, her eyes thoughtful. "Do you think Sarah noticed anything different about us?" she asked softly. John laughed quietly, shaking his head. "She might have. But it doesn't matter. This night wasn't about her noticing us. It was about facing a challenge together and seeing each other clearly." Leela smiled, understanding perfectly. "Exactly, and I think we did that." As they reached the truck, John paused for a moment, looking out at the quiet city streets. "You know," he said slowly, "I wasn't sure if coming here was a good idea. I thought it might be awkward, uncomfortable, or even painful, but I'm glad I did it. Because I learned a lot, not just about the past, but about myself, about courage, and about trust." Leela leaned slightly against the truck, her dark eyes reflecting the soft glow of the streetlights. "And I'm glad I came too," she said. "I didn't know what to expect, but I think this night has changed something for both of us. It's shown us that connections can happen in the most unexpected places." John opened the truck door and stepped inside, gesturing for Leela to join him. As they drove slowly away from the wedding venue, the quiet hum of the engine filled the space between them. The city lights gradually gave way to the dark, open roads leading back to the ranch. The air was calm, filled with the soft sounds of the night, distant crickets, the rustling of trees, and the occasional call of a night bird. For a while, neither spoke. The silence was comfortable, a reflection of the understanding that had grown between them over the past hours. They were both processing the evening, reflecting on the challenges, the small victories, and the lessons learned. Finally, Leela spoke, her voice soft and thoughtful. "Do you think we'll remember this night for a long time?" John smiled faintly. "I think we will. Not because of the wedding itself, but because of what we learned, about people, about life, and about each other." Leela nodded, her eyes reflecting the quiet certainty of her words. "Yes, it feels like more than just a wedding. It feels like a turning point." John glanced at her, realizing how much he valued her presence. "You've been more than a companion tonight. You've been a guide, a friend, and someone who sees me for who I am. That matters more than I can say." Leela smiled warmly. "And you've been patient, honest, and respectful. That matters to me too, not just tonight but in general." As the miles passed, the conversation drifted to lighter topics, favorite moments of the evening, small incidents that had made them laugh, and observations about the guests. They laughed together at awkward interactions, recalled moments of tension, and marveled at how they had supported each other through the night. The humor, warmth, and ease between them grew naturally, a testament to the bond that had formed in just a few hours. By the time they reached the outskirts of the ranch, the first hints of dawn were beginning to light the horizon. The sky was painted in soft pinks and golds, a new day breaking over the land they both loved, though in different ways. The open fields, the familiar scent of earth and grass, and the quiet strength of the land welcomed them back. John parked the truck near the barn, taking a deep breath. The quiet of the ranch was familiar, grounding, and comforting. Leela stepped out, stretching slightly and looking out at the open fields. "It feels good to be back," she said softly. John nodded, a sense of calm settling over him. "It does. And it feels different this time. I've learned a lot tonight about myself and about trust. And I hope we can carry that forward." Leela looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "I think we can. This night has shown us that life can surprise you, that courage and honesty matter, and that connections can form in unexpected ways. We just need to be open to them." They walked together toward the house, the soft morning light brushing the landscape. The animals stirred in the barn, the birds began their morning songs, and the ranch awoke to a new day. John and Leela paused briefly, taking in the calm beauty of the world around them. "You know," John said, breaking the quiet, "this night could have gone very differently, but with you here it was meaningful, not perfect, not flawless, but real." Leela smiled, a warmth in her eyes that reflected both understanding and affection. "That's the best kind of night," she said, "real, honest, and full of learning." They entered the ranch house together, feeling the comfort of home after the challenges of the city. John prepared coffee while Leela unpacked her small bag, the morning light casting a gentle glow across the room. They moved around naturally, their shared silence filled with reflection rather than tension. Finally, they sat together at the kitchen table, each with a warm cup of coffee in hand. The quiet morning embraced them, a gentle reward after the night's challenges. John looked at Leela, a thoughtful expression on his face. "I hope this is just the beginning," he said softly. Leela's eyes met his, steady and warm. "I think it can be," she said. "We've started something not just tonight but in how we understand each other. That's worth holding on to." John nodded, feeling a sense of peace and hope he hadn't expected. The wedding, the challenges, the confrontations, and the lessons had all led to this quiet moment of clarity. He realized that life, with its unexpected twists and turns, had given him something valuable: trust, understanding, and a connection he hadn't anticipated. Leela took a sip of her coffee and smiled, the sun rising fully over the horizon now. "You know, it's strange," she said thoughtfully, "how one night can change so much, but I think it did, for both of us." John reached across the table, a simple gesture of gratitude and connection. "Yes, and I'm glad it did. I'm glad you were here." They sat in quiet reflection for a few moments, watching the sun rise over the ranch, feeling the calm, the beauty, and the hope that the new day promised. The wedding had ended, but the lessons, the bond, and the understanding they had gained would remain. And as the morning light touched the land around them, John and Leela felt ready to face whatever life would bring next, together, or at least with the knowledge that trust, honesty, and courage could guide them through any challenge. The ranch stretched out before them, open, calm, and full of possibilities. And in that quiet, peaceful moment, John and Leela knew that this night, this journey had not just been about a wedding. It had been about growth, connection, and the quiet beginnings of something.